All right, so we are continuing with part two of chapter 9 of Tanya. And just to recap the topic that we're discussing, chapter 9 is discussing the location of the animal soul and the godly soul. And by understanding their locations, we can better understand their functioning. And we explained how the animal soul is located in the heart, specifically in the left part of the heart, the one where there's always some reserves of blood. And that's where, after the blood is cleaned and filtered and ready to go, that's where it's pumped out from to the rest of the body. Um, and so, because the heart functions in that way that it influences the body from there, the animal soul is centralized over there. That's where its home base is, if you will. And so its impact on the body is one that's heart oriented, emotionally motivated. Whereas the godly soul rests primarily in the mind. And so it operates from a place of intellect, from a place of rationality. It operates from it dictates everything based on logic and understanding. And so it starts it starts in the brain and it goes to the rest of the body, including the heart. But even when it reaches the heart, even when the godly soul influences the heart, it does so with the starting point being the brain. So what that looks like is that when you have an emotion, an excitement that's motivated by the godly soul, because the godly soul could motivate emotions as well, it's one that's predicated on the principles and the ideas and the values that the mind tells you beforehand. So we're up to the words "Ukamai shakasav leiv chacham liminai." If you don't have the text in front of you, I'm going to post a link in the chat. Um, or you can just go to jewisharcadia.com/7888, and that should take you directly to the ninth chapter of Tanya. And
Thank you for doing that.
what's that?
Thanks for doing that.
No problem. Hold on. I just lost the link. What? Um, but we're not all the way in the beginning, but rather we're kind of if you're on a computer, it should be right where it has like the side panels at the end of the side panels where it says hospital chaplaincy and Shabbat. Right at the bottom of there, as it's written, the heart of the wise man is on his right. So, as always, I'm not using the translation directly from Chabad.org or from our website, but it's just a reference so you have an idea where we're holding. So this verse, which comes from Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 2, is a reference to the godly soul. Chacham is the godly soul, which is primarily intellect. And when we say that the heart of the wise man is to his right, that means that the emotions of the godly soul are expressed in the right side of the heart. We said earlier that the animal soul is based in the left side of the heart, but the right side is kind of less bloody. It's less saturated with blood, is what I mean. Um, so the Alter Rebbe is going to now give two examples where the godly soul arouses emotions in the heart, but they're dictated by the mind. And you can see even within the emotions that these are emotions that were not just, emotional emotions, but they were intellect-driven emotions. So he continues, Vihi avas Hashem karish beishal heves misla heves b'leiv maskilim. This is the love of God, like a fiery flame. That's a flame in the heart of intellectuals. Hamevinim umispairim edaitam, who understand and they contemplate with their knowledge asher b'meicham, which is in their brain, but dvarim hamarim masahava, into things, into matters and ideas that cause them, that arouse them to love God. So that's the first example. The first example he gives is from the from the emotion of love. So when the godly soul um, experiences love of God, that's caused by a person thinking about the greatness of God and meditating on that. And so that love is only born out of and predicated on a great deal of meditation. So it starts in the brain, and because the brain was able to meditate on that concept of the greatness and the awesomeness of God, that spills over and has an effect on the heart to now actually feel a love for God. So even though it's a emotional love, the heart is experiencing it right now, and the heart is on fire, as he says. It's a flaming fire. However, that love is permeated with a intellectual aspect which caused it to exist in the first place, and that's why it's called an intellectual love, meaning it's love that's present within an intellectual type of person. V'chein simchas levav, and so too with the attribute of joy, with the emotion of joy, b'tiferes Hashem v'adar goyne, with the beauty of God and his glorious wisdom. How does he translate over here? With the majesty of his glory. Okay. So another example for this is that the emotions of the godly soul are formed from the intellect and the mind. And we see this in the attribute of Tiferes, which is the third of the three emotions of the godly soul, which is when the soul gets excited with joy of the heart, which is a result of a intellectual gaze, an intellectual looking into the greatness and the majesty and glory of God. And he elaborates, Kasher when the eyes of a wise man, which is in his head, with the mind of his wisdom and understanding, gaze into the glory of the king, and the greatness, the beauty of his greatness, to the point of no further probing and no limit and no end to his understanding. As explained elsewhere, how God is infinite, and however far we're going to go, we'll never truly comprehend him. So when a person thinks about God's greatness and all its beauty, that creates a feeling of excitement and upliftedness of the soul, uplifted in a way of joy and happiness. And this is true in general. When a person looks at a glorious king and sees his majesty and his beauty and his grandeur, it gets very exciting. So when a person sees the glory of Hashem and looks deeply into it, to the point that he doesn't only understand God's greatness, but he's seeing God's greatness. He's looking at it with his own eyes. There's the physiological sensation of, wow, I see this, I'm connected to it. So then that creates a feeling of excitement in the heart, and the soul feels uplifted. And the same is true with all the holy emotions in the heart. Remember, the heart is not some, it's not something that we look down on. It's not something that's negative. It's just, it could be used for unholy things. It could pull you in unholy directions. But then there's the holy attributes in the heart, which come from the Chabad, the wisdom, the understanding, and the knowledge in the mind. And the same could be applied to all of the emotional attributes in the heart, that they all are influenced from the intellect in the person. Elderly Chassidim used to say that how do you know when you want to do something, yeah, you have a desire, a thought pops into your head, an idea pops into your head. You have a desire to do something, and how do you know if that desire originates in the godly soul or in the animal soul? Um, and oftentimes we face situations in life where we want to do something and we don't know, is this something that's advisable or inadvisable? Is it something that I should try to refrain from doing even though I want to, or should I just, follow my heart, right? They say in the talent, you ever watch America's Got Talent? They say, follow your heart and follow your dreams and you never know where you can make it. It's not always true. Just because you had a dream, just because you had a want and you had a heart and you had a desire for something, doesn't mean you should always follow it. As Hasidim, we're always looking internally, we're introspective, and we say, wait a second, I need to analyze this thought, this want, this desire. Is this okay? Does it check out or it doesn't check out? So how do you know what's right and what's wrong? So if the desire comes from the mind, in other words, it originated in the mind, that's where the idea came from. So then it probably comes from the godly soul. But if it started in the heart, then you start rationalizing it, then you know it comes from the animal soul. So let me give you an example. You're scrolling through Facebook, you're scrolling through the internet, and you see an ad for a beautiful beach in Bali or out of nowhere, right? And you look at it, you're like, oh, wow, I wish I could be there, right? And then you start telling yourself, I've been working hard lately. It's time for a break. And you know what? That break should be in Bali in that picture that I saw in an ad, right? That comes from the animal soul. Why? Because you saw the picture, you got excited, and now you rationalized why it's okay for you to go there. On the other hand, a person can end up in Bali motivated by the godly soul. How's that possible? Now you're going to say, oh, okay, so now that I want to go to Bali, let me hear what the rabbi is going to say, how I can justify for my godly soul. No. Leave Bali out of the equation. A person, theoretically, this is possible. A person could be studying Torah, davening, working hard. He's sitting in front of a sefer, he's sitting in front of a mimer, he's sitting with the Tanya in his hand, and something's not working. So he's like, you know what? Let me drink a coffee. Let me do this. Let me do that. Maybe this teacher is not connecting with me. I'm going to find another rabbi on YouTube and listen to Tanya from him. And by the way, those who are watching on YouTube, if you feel that this is not interesting enough and you want to click away to a different rabbis here in Tanya, by all means, whatever speaks to you, that's okay. But if after doing all that and something's not working, you need to figure out what's the problem. Why am I not connecting with, whether it's learning Tanya, whether it's davening, whatever it might be? And in some rare cases, after you've exhausted all other options, you might come to the conclusion that, something, you're just stressed and you need a little vacation. And if you're not sure, by the way, don't consult yourself. Consult a mentor. Consult somebody outside yourself who's not biased. But if you did all that, you exhausted all other options, and all you're left with is, I simply need a vacation. And in some cases, that's 100% justified. So then that vacation might take you to Indonesia, it might take you to Mexico, it might take you to Laguna Beach. I don't know. But then it's possible and it's plausible that doing something like that could have been motivated by the godly soul. Why? Because it started in the brain. Your brain is saying, I have an issue. My learning is not going the way it's supposed to be. My davening is not going the way it's supposed to be. My desire to give tzedakah is lacking and I'm not excited about it enough. How do I change that? Okay, so we're strategizing. We're having a meeting in the brain. We're brainstorming to figure out a solution to a problem. Sometimes that solution might be an enjoyable one. And in that case, by all means, enjoy it and come back invigorated and so on and so forth. But the way to know the difference is where did the idea start? Did the idea start because I'm an introspective person and I'm trying to figure out how to serve God better, and I've tried to consider options that are less self-serving, and I came to the conclusion that this enjoyable activity is a way to help me serve God? Okay, green light. But if it came because I saw an ad and I got excited and now I'm trying to justify it, no, no, no. That comes from the animal soul. That's the heart spreading to the rest of the body, including the brain. So now that we know where the godly soul and the animal soul are each located and how they operate, the animal soul operating from here to everywhere else, and the godly soul beginning from here and spreading downwards to everywhere else. Problem is, in the everywhere else, there's some competing interests, right? Now we're going to talk about the actual battlefield, the little town, the little city, which is the human body. So the Alter Rebbe continues, Achine Ksiv. It's written in Parshas Toldos in the book of Genesis. It's written, Ula'im mila'im yamotz, and one nation will overpower the other nation. And this is talking about Yaakov and Esav. The story is that Rivka, after many years of not having any children, her and her husband Yitzchak davened to Hashem. They went to two opposite sides of the room. They prayed. And finally, God answered their prayers. She becomes pregnant. And she's confused that, she passed by a house of idolatry and the baby's getting excited. But then she passes by a house of study. Shem and Aver had a yeshiva. Even back then, they had yeshivas. And the baby's getting excited there too. So she's confused. Is this an idolatrous leaning baby, or is this a yeshiva leaning baby? She went to consult the prophet, and the prophet tells her, actually, this is before ultrasounds, tells her, you actually have two children, and they're heading in opposite directions. And when one is powerful, the other will be weakened, and when one is weakened, the other will be powerful. So that's what he's referring to over here. He says, one nation will prevail over another. And that's used as a metaphor for the two souls within us, the godly soul and the animal soul. So although each of the two souls has a designated place where its home base is, so to speak, that doesn't mean that it just runs its show and, you go to Disneyland, for example, you have one show on the north side of the park and you have a magic show on the north side of the park and a bunny show on the south side of the park. And whoever wants to go to this show could go to this show. You want to go to that show, you go to that show. No, this is something that spreads throughout the whole body. Everyone has to show up, at least as far as the performer is concerned. As far as each soul is concerned, it wants to overpower the entirety of the body. And the godly soul wants the entire body to be acting in a godly way, and the animal soul wants the entire body to be acting in an animalistic way. So in the original, in Genesis chapter 25, verse 23, where it's talking about Yaakov and Esav, it's saying that there are going to be two kingdoms, and it's impossible for them to be equally great. So when one kingdom is great, the other one will fall. But spiritually, the inner meaning of these two nations is that Yaakov is referring to the side of holiness. Esav is referring to the high side of the opposite of holiness, the animalistic side. And they're constantly battling each other. When one's overpowering the body, when the godly soul is overpowering the body, the animal soul is weakened. When the animal soul is overpowering the body, the godly soul is weakened. You can't remain unaffected one from the other. Why? Ki haguf nikra ir kitana, because the body is called a small city. So this is from Ecclesiastes chapter 9. It talks about that there's a small city and very few people, and there was a big king. And anyways, it you see that the verse describes the body and all its limbs to a small city. And the two souls, the godly soul and the animal soul, the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, are two kings who are battling with each other over this city, and each one wants to conquer it. So that's what's happening inside our bodies. Now the Rebbe continues, and just as when there's two kings fighting over one city, and by the way, it's important to emphasize it's a small city. You can't tell one of the kings, listen here, we'll give you half the city. Like, come on, it's a tiny little city. I want the whole thing. Right? Each one wants to conquer it and dominate over it. What does dominion mean? It means that all the residents of the city listen to me. And they should lean towards his discipline with everything that he rules over them. So, so in the analogy of the two kings battling over a city, it's not enough that the city should be attributed to him and associated with him, but they want to dominate the city. That means the people in the city should listen to the king, and whatever the king says, they should listen. Otherwise, how am I going to show that I'm the king? I'm not some this isn't like an investment project. Like, okay, whatever, you do your thing. I have my 10% stock, and when the stock rises, I make some money. But otherwise, I'm fairly uninvolved. No, I'm the king. I rule over this. You have to listen to me. Kach shtei hanefashes, so too the two souls, the godly soul and the vivifying animalistic soul, which comes from klipa, they're battling with each other over the body, but not just the body, and every limb of the body. So simply put, when somebody doesn't learn Chassidus, the way they look at the person is that a person has one soul keeping them alive. You have the ability. The soul is what allows you to do stuff, but you have two yetzers. You have two desires, and the desires are directing the soul where to go. One desire is pulling him to do good things, and the other side, the other yetzer, is trying to convince him to do other things. But the way Chassidus explains it is that really every person has two souls, and each soul is a full structure with a full set of its own powers and capabilities to think and to do, to activate, to feel. So it's not just you have one soul and it could lean this way or another, but it's an entire soul. It's an entire structure of a soul that wants to dominate over an entire body in every facet of the body. And so the only way the soul could really express itself is if it dominates the whole body. Because if it only takes control of half the body, it's not a fully expressive soul. In other words, if you're talking about the intellectual faculties of the soul, whether it's the godly soul or animal soul, those intellectual faculties of the soul could only express itself in the intellectual part of the body, in the brain. Right? So the godly soul's intellect, for instance, can't control the fingers. It can control the brain only. But the but the intellectual, the godly soul's ability to control fingers doesn't control how you think. In other words, the soul, even though it's one unit, it's it's a unit that's comprised of all different capabilities. And those capabilities line up with the various limbs of the body, and they can either connect with those limbs and control those limbs, or you're allowing the other soul, the animal soul, let's say, to dominate those limbs. So the moment one soul takes control of any part of the body, it's automatically kicking out and um, disconnecting the other soul from that part of the body. Um, and so the two souls, just like a king who doesn't allow for any defectors, in a dictatorship, there's no free speech and dissent, right? Everybody has to follow the king. And so the two souls are trying to create a dictatorship, so to speak. And if there's a part of the body that's part of the other camp, that's a rebellion against the king. Um, and so when the body and all its limbs identifies and is taken over, identifies as and is taken over by the godly soul, everything that the body does is a godly service. It's doing godly things. But when the identity of the body is associated with the animal soul, then everything the body does will be physical things and benefiting from this world in a physical way. And obviously, those two desires and the two expressions of the two souls are always diametrically opposed. So each soul is constantly trying to dominate the body completely from head to toe. Every last detail has to be in its control, and the other soul wants it to be in its control. And that's why there's such a heavy battle that's always ongoing. There's no concessions, there's no mediation going on, but it's a constant battle that they're trying to overpower the body. And so if you ever felt like, there's a battle going on inside of you, this is why, because there's two kings trying to battle over this one entity. There's only one body to split, and you can't split it. It's either the godly soul controlling it, or it's the animal soul controlling it, and that's the name of the game. There's a lot more to say on this, but we'll continue next week, God willing.